12 years. That's how long I had built my life around two things, my career and my marriage. I had given them everything, investing not just time but my very sense of purpose. Yet, in a single moment, everything shattered. I walked into her office as I had so many times before. The walls were lined with awards, most of them ones I had helped earn for the company. But today, something felt off. There was a tension in the air, something unspoken but heavy. Elara, my wife, sat behind her desk, her manicured fingers tapping lightly against the surface. A slow smirk crept across her face, one that made my stomach tighten. "Ambrose," she said in a voice that was almost amused. "Take a seat." I remained standing. I had seen that look before, calculated, deliberate. She let out a small chuckle and leaned forward. "Fine, have it your way. I'll keep this simple. You've been with the company for 12 years. We're making some changes." I felt my pulse quicken. "Changes?" Her smirk deepened. "Yes. You're out." For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. "Excuse me." My voice was steady, but my hands clenched at my sides. "You heard me." She folded her arms, as if this was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "You're being let go." The room felt smaller, the air thinner. She continued, her tone almost playful. "And, well, you'll love this part." She paused, savoring the moment before dropping the final blow. "You'll be training your replacement. His name is Callan." Callan. The name wasn't unfamiliar. It took me a second before realization hit. He was someone I had seen around the office once or twice. I hadn't thought much of him at the time, but now his presence made sense. "You're joking," I said, though deep down, I knew she wasn't. She laughed softly. "Oh, Ambrose, why would I joke? He's bright, young, ambitious, and, well, I think you'll find that we're quite close." Her words were calculated, a loaded gun waiting to fire. And then, she pulled the trigger. "He's my boyfriend." There it was. The final betrayal, laid out so casually, as if she were discussing a simple office restructure rather than the complete dismantling of my life. My heart pounded, but my face remained impassive. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me react. I nodded once. "Of course." Her smirk faltered just slightly. She had expected anger, outrage, maybe even desperation. But I gave her none of it. Because what she didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment. 3 months ago, I had noticed the shift. The late nights. The distant looks. The excuses that didn't quite add up. I had felt it in my gut before I ever had proof. So I had done what I always did. I planned ahead. Elara thought she was blindsiding me. She had no idea that, while she was busy playing her little game, I had been making moves of my own. She thought she was taking everything from me. But tomorrow, she would learn the truth. And she would never see it coming. I walked out of her office with steady steps, feeling the weight of her words settle inside me like a dull ache. "You're out. Train your replacement. He's my boyfriend." They echoed in my head, each syllable sharp and deliberate, like a blade dragging slowly across my skin. But I didn't let it show. I kept my expression neutral, my breathing even. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me crack. If she expected a meltdown, she was in for a disappointment. The hallway outside her office felt colder than usual. The people I had worked with for years barely made eye contact as I passed. They knew. Maybe not all of them, but enough. The whispers had started long before today, and I had been too blind or too trusting to hear them. I made my way to my own office, shutting the door behind me. My name was still on the plaque outside. My chair still molded to my form when I sat down. My desk still held the framed photo of us, back when I thought us meant something. I stared at it for a long moment before turning it face down. For a while, I did nothing. Just sat there, absorbing the reality of what had just happened. My wife had cheated on me. With someone younger, someone I had unknowingly crossed paths with. And she had planned this meticulously, waiting for the perfect moment to cut me loose. I had given her 12 years of my life. And she had thrown me away like I was nothing. But what she didn't know was that I had seen the signs long before she made her move. 3 months ago, I had noticed the sudden shift, the way she had started dressing differently for work, the extra time she spent in meetings that didn't seem to exist, the distant way she kissed me goodnight. I had asked questions. She had given vague answers. I had watched. She had assumed I was oblivious. And so, while she was busy plotting my downfall, I had been making my own plans. I turned to my computer and pulled up a folder I had labeled for emergencies. Inside, neatly stored and time-stamped, were emails, conversations, bank statements, signed contracts, things she thought I had no knowledge of. I scrolled through them, a slow smirk curling at the edge of my lips. She thought she had outmaneuvered me. But tomorrow? Tomorrow, the game would change. Tomorrow, she would realize that the empire she had tried to build with him was standing on the very foundation I had been slowly chipping away. And when it all came crashing down, I wanted to see the look on her face. That night, I barely slept. Not because I was heartbroken. No, that emotion had been burned out of me the moment Elara smirked and told me about Callan. It wasn't grief keeping me up. It was anticipation. Tomorrow would be the beginning of the end. At dawn, I got up, moving through the motions of my morning routine like a machine. Shower, coffee, suit, tie. It felt like a ritual, dressing for the final battle of a war that had already been decided. When I arrived at the office, I wasn't surprised to see the way people looked at me. The fake sympathy, the hushed murmurs. They all knew. I stepped into my office for what would be one of the last times. My things were still there, neatly arranged. A silent testament to the 12 years I had given this place. And now, I was expected to pack up, fade into the background, and let Callan take my place. Not happening. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. "Morning, Ambrose," a voice said smoothly. I turned, and there he was. Callan stood in the doorway, dressed like me. A sharp suit, polished shoes, tie knotted just right. He had the confidence of a man who thought he had already won. The arrogance of it made my skin crawl. "I figured I'd introduce myself," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I know things must be awkward, but I just want you to know that I respect what you've built here." I just looked at him. He smirked. The same smirk Elara had given me yesterday, like they had rehearsed this moment together. I folded my hands in front of me. "So, you respect what I've built?" He nodded. "Of course. That's why I want to learn from you. I mean, you're a legend around here. Who better to teach me than the man who ran this company for over a decade?" He was enjoying this. I could see it in his posture, in the way his shoulders relaxed, in the way his eyes flickered with amusement. I leaned back in my chair, studying him. He thought today would be his victory. He had no idea. "You know what, Callan?" I said slowly, letting the silence stretch. "I think you're right. You should learn from me." His smirk faltered just slightly, as if he hadn't expected that. "Yeah." I nodded. "Absolutely." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Take a seat. Let's get started." His grin returned as he settled in, eager. I turned to my computer, pulling up everything. The files, the transactions, the emails, the proof that Elara had been using him. And then, with the slow precision of a man completely in control, I turned the screen toward him. And I watched as his world cracked open. The moment Callan's eyes landed on the screen, the smirk on his face flickered. Not gone entirely. Not yet. But there was a hesitation, a twitch at the corner of his lips, like his brain was trying to process something that didn't fit his expectations. He thought today would be the first step in his grand ascent. He thought I would be humiliated, that I would swallow my pride and teach him everything I knew before walking away, defeated. Instead, I was showing him exactly what he had walked into. "What is this?" he asked, his voice lacking the smooth confidence he had a few minutes ago. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands in my lap like a man with all the time in the world. "Go ahead, take a closer look." His brows knitted together as he started scrolling. Emails, bank transfers, contracts, conversations between Elara and key executives, deals being made behind closed doors, plans set in motion long before Callan ever came into the picture. He swallowed. "This is the full scope of what's been happening behind your back," I finished for him. "It's all there, Callan. The real reason why I was being pushed out." I paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "And why you were being brought in." He looked up at me, his throat bobbing as he swallowed again. "Elara, she used you." I kept my voice calm, even. No malice, no anger, just cold, calculated truth. She found someone younger, someone ambitious but naive, someone she could control. His jaw clenched. I could see it happening in real time, his brain trying to reject what he was seeing. He wanted to believe that he had won, that she loved him, that he was more than just a pawn in her carefully constructed game. But the truth was right in front of him, and there was no running from it. His fingers tightened on the edge of my desk. "She told me she fought for me, that the board wasn't sure about hiring me, but she made sure they had no choice." I cut in smoothly. "She convinced them that I had lost my edge, that the company needed fresh blood." His breathing was heavier now, nostrils flaring slightly. She's planning to take full control once I'm out, I continued. Not just over the company, but over you. She's already signed contracts shifting power into her hands. Within a year, your name will be just a footnote in this company's history. He shook his head, denial creeping in. No, that's not. She's been siphoning money into a separate account for months, Callan. Money that was supposed to be part of your salary increase. Money you'll never see. His face darkened. His breathing picked up. Good. I didn't need him to believe me immediately. I just needed to plant the seed. And I could already see it taking root. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. You think she's doing all this for you? That you're the exception? That she wouldn't throw you away the second someone younger, shinier, and more useful came along? He blinked rapidly, realization dawning. I sat back. Checkmate. For the first time since stepping into my office, Callan didn't have a word to say. He had just realized he wasn't the one playing the game. He was just another piece on the board. And Elara? She had been the one moving the pieces. Until now. Tomorrow, she would see just how wrong she was. Callan was still sitting there, staring at the screen, his fingers twitching against the edge of my desk like he wanted to reach through the monitor and rip the truth apart with his bare hands. But he couldn't, because it was real. The numbers didn't lie. The contracts were in plain sight, and Elara's signature was on every single one. I watched him go through each document like a man trying to find a loophole in his own execution. His face was losing color, his confidence unraveling at the seams. The arrogance, the smirk, the cocky ease in his voice was gone. Now, all that was left was the realization that he had walked straight into a trap, thinking he was the predator. And I wasn't done yet. I let the silence hang in the air between us, stretching just long enough to let the weight of it sink in before I spoke again. You still think you're the winner here, Callan? My voice was level, unshaken. Still think she fought for you? He exhaled sharply, his fingers curling into fists. This doesn't make sense. She hesitated. She said we were building something together. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. No, Callan. She was building something for herself. I gestured to the screen. You were just the newest tool in her collection. And once she's done with you, she'll move on. His eyes flicked back to the contracts, scanning them like he was hoping for a hidden clause, some fine print that would erase the reality staring him in the face. Look at this one, I continued, reaching over and clicking on another file. A new document filled the screen, this one detailing a new hiring proposal. A proposal that had been drafted only 2 weeks ago. For another executive position. A younger candidate. Male. Single. And guess whose name was nowhere on the recommendation list? Callan's. I didn't even need to say it. His face said it all. The moment his eyes locked onto the text, something inside him cracked. He was next. I leaned back in my chair, watching the reality sink in. She already has a replacement lined up, Callan. His breathing picked up, faster now, his hand running through his hair as if he could somehow pull the thoughts from his skull. No, he stopped himself, rubbing his forehead. His confidence was gone, and I wasn't about to let him pick up the pieces. Do you know what your biggest mistake was? I asked. His head snapped up, his eyes flickering with frustration. What? I kept my gaze steady. You assumed you were the first. Silence. His fingers twitched. What do you mean? I sighed, shaking my head slowly, letting him feel the pause. Callan, did you really think this was new? That you were some special case? That Elara just woke up one morning and decided to throw away 12 years of marriage and business for you. The look on his face told me everything I needed to know. He had believed that. I let out a humorless chuckle. You're not even in the top 5. His breath caught in his throat. You're lying. I clicked again, pulling up another file. More names. More documents. More evidence. And there it was, a pattern. Elara had done this before. She had cycled through men, each one thinking they were the exception. Each one thinking they were the one she had chosen, the one she was leaving her old life behind for. And each one had been discarded exactly like I'd been. The only difference? I saw it coming. Callan swallowed hard. He was still trying to fight it, still trying to cling to the illusion that he had mattered to her, that he wasn't just another name on a list. I let him sit in that for a moment, let him feel the weight of it. Then I stood up, walking over to the window, looking out over the city. My city. I had built a life here, built a name, a career, a future. And Elara had tried to take it from me. But tomorrow, when she walked into this office, thinking she was untouchable, she would realize just how wrong she was. I turned back to Callan, my expression unreadable. I don't need you to believe me, Callan. Not yet. I nodded toward the door. Go. Confront her. See what she says. He hesitated. Then, without another word, he stormed out. I watched him go, then exhaled slowly, a quiet satisfaction settling into my bones. The first domino had fallen. Tomorrow, everything else would follow. The moment Callan stormed out of my office, I knew it was only a matter of time before everything unraveled. I didn't follow him. I didn't need to. The moment he confronted Elara, she would panic. Not at first, not visibly. She was too good for that. Too well practiced in controlling narratives, in twisting the truth to keep herself in power. But deep inside, she would feel it. The ground cracking beneath her feet. I took my time. Logged out of my computer. Gathered a few personal belongings, but not everything. Not yet. Because I wasn't done. By the time I walked out of my office, I could already hear it. Raised voices. Elara's office door was half shut, but I could still hear Callan's voice, sharp, demanding. His usual arrogance was replaced with something raw, something desperate. I stopped just outside, leaning casually against the wall. This isn't true, right? Callan's voice was tight, breathless. Tell me it's not. Elara's response came smoothly, effortlessly. I don't know what you've seen, Callan, but whatever Ambrose told you, He didn't just tell me, Elara, Callan snapped. He showed me. A pause. Emails. Bank records. Contracts with my name nowhere on them. Silence. I could almost see the shift in Elara's expression, even without looking. Her mind was working, calculating, recalibrating. Then, the inevitable, Callan, baby, you're overreacting. Her voice was smooth, persuasive. I didn't tell you about those things because I didn't want to worry you. You know how these corporate deals work. There are always moving parts. Callan wasn't buying it. Don't patronize me. I read the contracts. The new hiring proposal. You already had a replacement lined up for me. Another pause. I imagined Elara keeping her expression neutral, her lips pressing together just slightly as she figured out her next move. Callan, listen to me, she said, lowering her voice now, making it soft. Tactical. You mean everything to me. I fought for you. I made sure you got this job. You made sure I took Ambrose's job. His voice was bitter now. And now you're making sure someone else takes mine. A sharp exhale. Then, Elara switched tactics. This is his doing, she said suddenly. Her voice gained heat. He's lying to you. He's trying to turn you against me because he's bitter and pathetic and... Callan cut her off. No, his voice was flat. No, he didn't try to turn me against you, Elara. You did that yourself. More silence. I allowed myself a small, satisfied breath. This was it. The moment where the illusion cracked completely. You used me. Callan's voice was quieter now. Did you ever even care about me? Or was I just another name on the list? I could hear the moment the power dynamic shifted. For the first time, Elara had nothing to say. Callan let out a bitter chuckle. That's what I thought. A pause. Then, softer, like he was talking to himself. God, I'm an idiot. A chair scraped against the floor, and I stepped away from the door just in time for Callan to storm out. His face was tight, his jaw clenched, but there was something else there now, humiliation. Not at her. At himself. His eyes flicked up and landed on me. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away. I waited a few seconds before stepping into Elara's office. She was sitting at her desk, her lips pursed, her fingers drumming against the surface in agitation. She looked up, her eyes narrowing. What did you do? She hissed. I smirked. Oh, Elara, I said, shaking my head. This is just the beginning. Her jaw tightened. You think you've won something? She let out a humorless laugh. You think this will hurt me? Callan was nothing but a distraction. You're still the one losing everything. I shrugged. Maybe. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. But tell me something, Elara, how do you think the board is going to react when they realize you brought in a fraudulent hire? She stilled. I leaned forward. And when they see that $500,000 has mysteriously disappeared into a separate account, one that just so happens to be under your name? Her breath hitched. You. I've been watching you for a long time, Elara. My voice was calm, even. You think you covered your tracks, but you got sloppy. Too comfortable. And now? I tilted my head. Now, it's all about to come crashing down. Her face drained of color. For the first time in years, I saw something I had never seen in Elara's eyes before. Fear. I straightened, adjusting my cuffs. I'll be seeing you at the board meeting tomorrow, I said. Should be an interesting conversation. Then I turned and walked out. As I stepped into the hallway, I exhaled slowly, feeling lighter than I had in months. This wasn't over. Not yet. But tomorrow? Tomorrow, the final domino would fall. The sun had barely started to rise when I pulled into the parking lot the next morning. The towering glass facade of the building loomed over me, a place that had once been my kingdom. Now, it was the battlefield where I would end this. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp. Elara had likely spent the entire night scrambling, making frantic calls, trying to figure out just how much I had on her. She thought she was untouchable, that she had played the game too well to be taken down. She had no idea just how much I had been waiting for this moment. I entered the building, passing the front desk without acknowledging the fake sympathy from the receptionist. They all knew what was happening. It wasn't just about my job anymore. Everyone had heard the whispers about Elara and Callan, about the power shift. Only now, the whispers weren't about my downfall. They were about hers. I made my way up to the executive floor, my steps slow, deliberate. I had nothing to hide. I wasn't slinking in like a man about to be thrown out of his own empire. I was walking in to reclaim it. The boardroom. By the time I entered, most of the board members were already seated. A few offered polite nods, but no one spoke. They were waiting. At exactly 9 a.m., Elara walked in. She was composed. Too composed. Her lips were set in a practiced neutral expression, but I could see the faint tension in her shoulders, the way she gripped the tablet in her hands just a little too tightly. She thought she could control this. She thought she could control me. She took her seat at the head of the table, flashing a tight-lipped smile. "Good morning, everyone." Silence. Then one of the senior board members cleared his throat. "Elara, before we begin, I believe Ambrose requested to speak." Her jaw tightened for half a second. "Is that so?" She turned to me, her expression neutral. "Well, Ambrose, if you have something to say, I suppose now's the time." I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table. "I do." Then, without breaking eye contact, I pulled out the flash drive and slid it across the table. She didn't react, but the slight stiffening of her spine told me everything I needed to know. One of the board members picked it up, inserting it into the projector. Within seconds, the screen at the front of the room lit up. And then, the silence was deafening. The unraveling. Emails. Transactions. Proof of financial misconduct. Bank records showing large sums of money disappearing into an offshore account. A detailed timeline of Callan's hiring process, showing how she manipulated the board into pushing me out under false pretenses. Everything. Every lie. Every deception. Every single move she had made to secure power for herself. Projected for everyone to see. The color drained from her face. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The board members exchanged glances, whispers rippling through the room. One of them, an older man with sharp eyes, turned to Elara. "Is this accurate?" She hesitated. That single second of hesitation was her biggest mistake. Because now, they knew. She opened her mouth, trying to recover. "This is being misinterpreted." "No, it isn't," I cut in smoothly. "The transactions are real. The emails are real. And if anyone needs further proof, I'd be more than happy to provide recorded conversations." That did it. Her head snapped toward me, her eyes flashing with panic for the first time. I had her. The board members were already murmuring amongst themselves. Legal counsel was called in. The CFO was reviewing the records in real time, confirming every single piece of evidence. And Elara? She was crumbling. The control she had spent years building, the power she had sacrificed everything for, was slipping right through her fingers. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just watched. Watched as her world collapsed. Watched as she tried and failed to spin a new lie. Until, finally, the chairman of the board let out a long breath and shook his head. Effective immediately, Elara is being placed under internal investigation. And just like that, it was over. She lost. Aftermath. I walked out of that meeting without a word. I didn't need to stay. I didn't need to watch the fallout. I had done exactly what I came to do. By the time I reached the elevator, my phone buzzed. A new email. Subject, reinstatement offer. A slow breath left my chest. I stepped into the elevator, pressing the button for the ground floor. Tomorrow, everything would be different. For me. And for Elara? She would finally understand what it felt like. To be the one left with nothing. The city was still waking up as I stepped out of the office building for the last time, not because I had been forced out, but because I had chosen to walk away. The reinstatement offer sat in my inbox, unread. For 12 years, I had built my career, my marriage, my entire identity around this place. I had poured every ounce of energy into making sure this company succeeded, into making sure Elara succeeded. And in return, she had betrayed me. Not just as a husband, as a person. I had spent so much time waiting for this moment, picturing how it would feel to finally watch her lose. I had imagined the board meeting 1,000 times, imagined the look on her face when she realized she wasn't in control anymore. And yet, as I stood outside, staring at the city skyline, I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No triumph. Just clarity. The last encounter. I was almost at my car when I heard hurried footsteps behind me. Ambrose. I didn't turn immediately. I knew that voice. I had heard it lie to me. I had heard it mock me. And now? Now, it was shaking. I turned around. Elara stood there, her usual poise nowhere to be found. Her hair was slightly out of place, her lips pressed together as if she was fighting for the right words. I just waited. She hesitated, then exhaled sharply. You set me up. I tilted my head slightly. Did I? Her hands curled into fists. You knew. You knew for months, and instead of she stopped herself, gritting her teeth. You could have just left. You didn't have to humiliate me. I let out a soft chuckle. Not amused, just tired. Elara, I didn't humiliate you. I met her eyes. You did that yourself. She flinched. For a moment, just a second, I saw something behind her eyes. Not anger. Not defiance. Regret. But it was too late for that. You ruined me, she whispered. No, I said, shaking my head. You ruined yourself the moment you decided I was disposable. I took a step forward, lowering my voice. You took everything from me, Elara. My marriage. My career. My trust. And you expected me to just accept it. Silence stretched between us. Then, for the first time, she looked away. Not because she was calculating her next move. Not because she was trying to manipulate the conversation. But because she knew. I was right. And there was nothing left to say. I took one last look at her, the woman I had once loved. The woman I had built a life with. Then I turned and walked away. She didn't call after me. She didn't stop me. Because she knew. I was never coming back. Moving forward, I left the city that night. Packed my bags, got in my car, and drove. No real destination, just anywhere but here. By the time the news broke the next morning, I was already long gone. Elara's resignation. Internal fraud investigation. Legal consequences pending. She would spend the next few months trying to fix what was left of her reputation, but there was no coming back from this. And me? For the first time in 12 years. I was finally free.